Comfortable, I invite you to put your cameras on for when we do some interactive stuff. And if you feel most comfortable with it off, of course, do so. Before we go any further, I do want to share a practice that I regularly do in all of my work and begin by respectfully acknowledging that I'm zooming from the traditional and unceded territory of the Lenni Lenape people, otherwise known as Germantown, Philadelphia. As a beneficiary myself of settler colonialism and a present day artist committed to exploring the relationship between justice and healing work, ever exploring how to navigate a world awake to both the nature of suffering and possibilities of liberation, supporting larger truth-telling and repair. It's like a lifelong process to stay present, to challenge and conflict with an openness to the emergent future. It's important for me to acknowledge the reality that our society is built on acts of brutality and actively maintains systems of domination that seep into everything that we do. So white supremacy has been baked in from the beginning, and my work is committed to undoing that. And so much of my work really is about recapturing individual and collective agency. So as a check-in to start our day, I would like to do a one-word poem with everyone. I will give you a prompt and you'll fill in the blank. And you're going to fill in the blank with one word, although many may come to mind, just one word. And do not push return until I count down so that we get a waterfall of words and the poem comes alive through the action of the chat. So is that clear? I'm going to give you a prompt. You're going to fill in the blank. You're not going to push go until I count down. And on one, you all go at the same time. This is the story. When I am my most powerful self, I am blank. When I am my most powerful self, I am blank. Remember, you're typing it into the chat and you're not pushing go. If you could give me a thumbs up to let me know you have selected your word. Thank you, Dr. Donna, Mary Beth, Maggie, Hannah, Shayna, thank you. When I am my most powerful self, I am blank. 3, 2, 1, go. Did you see the waterfall? Focused, awesome, proud, safe, strong, present, confident, confident. Thank you. Thank you. May you hold on to those powerful selves at all times and always know that these adjectives, these qualities are in you all the time. And they're serving you because you are enough. Thank you. I'm now going to pass it to Mary Beth.
Good morning. It is, I am, forgive me, PowerPoint dependent. So unlike our dear Lisa Jo, but it is a great opportunity to be here. Dr. Rice, it is wonderful to see you again, actually see you. I come to share an experience with you that I have had over the past 5 years as a social worker, working with a local artist who has, you know, as Lisa Jo always has mentioned, with a lot of street cred. She has been many, many places. But one of the things that I have most learned is how we, in our own science, can open up to new opportunities and new methods maybe that we didn't even realize were there. I have worked in the field a long time in human services. As a social worker, I think a lot of my practice was informed by an understanding of theory, of policy, of research, and certainly evidence-based practice, which I'm going to talk about a little bit with you. But our purpose today, and it is somewhat of a relief to see such a small group, is over the next hour, I'm going to begin by talking about my perspective as a social worker. I'm going to talk a little bit about how that perspective met with artists and what it was like to kind of find our commonality, how we can together look at values that we share, a shared passion that we have. But I also wanted to bring up the idea too that our insights related to practice are also important for us to acknowledge and embrace, but also put aside sometimes. When we do community engagement work, it's not about us. It's about the community. And sometimes that community is not, we are not a member of it. So I think we need to understand a sense of where our role should be. And as I mentioned in this slide, approach it with a strong sense of unknowing. I'm going to ask, I don't know how I lost the agenda part here, but I'm going to go back a little bit to the original agenda so that Lisa Jo can pick up from there and explain the second half of this workshop, what it's going to be like.
So Shana, you can go back one slide.
Backward, there we go, sorry. Perfect.
So you're passing the ball to me?
I am.
I caught it. As I said earlier, we're going to have an experience. The second half will be experiential, and I'm going to share a process that I've been using in the field since 2014, but even prior to that, using it in other cities for similar projects. And I just want to touch on something that Mary Beth said about it. Often our work is not about us. And that is a beautiful segue into why I don't call the work that Just Act does community engagement. I call it community-based engagement. And the process, well, one, because in the world of arts-based engagement with communities, community engagement is now called like CE, and it has become, for me, evacuated of meaning. And it has returned to a very extractive process. So for Just Act and my work, we call it community-based engagement, because what resides at the heart of it are the community members. And I teach what you will experience today to a group of community members so that they can lead each other. And I become a sort of like backup support system, right? So that at every turn, there is an opportunity to create space for community members to tap into their most powerful selves that have been denied space, that have been denied opportunities to surface. And in doing so, grow a kind of self and community ownership. Pass the ball back.
So what would that look like as a social worker? You know, I want to go back just a minute there. Emphasizing something else is a lot of times when we spend years dedicated to a certain profession, a commitment to a group of people, a commitment to ourselves, it's hard sometimes to say, I don't know. And what I think I've learned, it is the most important sentence we can say. And so I want to emphasize again that idea of approaching any kind of community. We do need to come armed with that understanding of, I do not know what it is like to be you, but I want to learn. I want to be open to it. So I want to come back here to, as a social worker, what are some of the core parts of who I am? Are there any, I think there are a few people who are identified as students, am I right? Yeah. This should be familiar to you. It is from the preamble of the Code of Ethics of NASW. There are 6 values here that are a key part of who we are. They're part of our bones, part of our identity. You know, we have that deep respect for the dignity and worth of the person, but we're also committed to serve, and we're also committed to creating supportive relationships, as well as engaging directly with our clients, whether they're individuals, families, or communities in a relationship. We are attuned to listening for levels of injustice and opportunities for justice. And a part of who we are, of course, is embedded in us is integrity and competence. But a lot of times we as social workers look at this wide profession and start to think, which is my niche? Where would I like to put my talents? Where would I like to grow? Where would I like to build my knowledge? And so for those of you who are students, you can see that actually this little wordle matches the curriculum ladder of all of the different courses that you work in terms of your education as a social worker. But it's also a part of where we are committed. So there are some of us who may be very interested in maintaining what is really a dual-sided focus of both clinical work and also that taps into our rich history as social reformers. And part of that could mean studying policy, studying research, looking at theory and understanding more a little bit about, as scientists, why do we learn about evidence-based models? Where does that emphasis, where can it be applied to our work? So holding that thought, I'm bringing out a little blackboard to remind you of what you may have first learned when community organizing really was super revealed in the 1960s. Now let's remember our history as social reformers dates back, long in 100 years before this. But when Rothman talked about these three models, think of the volatile time it was during. It was during the 1960s. So community organizing was dedicated to the idea of how can we build a sense of cohesion and capacity of bringing people together in communities? How can we lend our resources and talents to support the process of addressing some of the social issues that are there? And how together with community members can we take on the conflict or the issues that really need to be confronted in local communities? So we started small. Over the course of 30 years, we would actually talk about not 3 aspects of different models, but we'd really expand that maybe to 8. So where we are today is a different place. But I think as social workers, I hope it's okay, Shana, that I did this, is that we are finding ourselves on this continuum. To me, this is what a community engagement process continuum looks like. Are we looking to see, okay, my interest might be that as an educator or a consultant, evaluator, and researcher. Is this where I am? Or do I look to see as a clinician, am I more interested in that level of networking and creating change and assisting individuals navigate different systems and policies? Am I a mediator? Or is my energy focused on being an advocate and an activist? What I'm suggesting today, what I have learned through the experience of community-based engagement with an artist, is that we never really lose sight of any of these. Ideally, we want to get to here, where there is a shared level of decision-making and participatory process to really promote social change. But none of these parts of us are ever really gone. And so some of the progress that has happened in terms of where we are today and expanding those models is looking at what Kretzmann and McKnight talks about as change from the inside out. We're not just focusing on assets rather than needs. We're not just saying that we partner with consumers or that consumers have a place. We're really committing to a collective level of collaboration that's genuine, that's authentic. And a key part of that is not just looking at communities in terms of areas or populations, but also culture. So a level of community engagement has really revealed the importance of cultural organizing, that we look at how culture has shaped individuals, how it's shaped relationships, and it's also shaped interpretations of how and who is in a leadership role. Millersville is part of what my community was as to learn the skills and grow as a social worker. So it was the first time I was really exposed to Paulo Freire and the concept of critical consciousness, that understanding of we can't really step in and support change until we stand with community members to be aware of what is it that surrounds them that may need to change. And part of that is a respect for the deep social history, the experiences over the course of time. Yes, we're focused on the here and now, but we need to respect what came before. And the only way we can really tap into that history is to listen. So 2015, I had a wonderful opportunity. I thought that I was very, deeply interested in research. I wanted to explore participatory research practice. I was a graduate assistant at Widener in the doctoral program. I was lucky enough to get a position as a graduate assistant as an evaluation team, part of an evaluation team. So this is where I first met Just Act and the artist Lisa Jo Epstein. Widener University is located in the city of Chester in Pennsylvania. There was an effort, what was called a demonstration or discovery project, in which Lisa Jo was one of the key leaders, together with Pennsylvania Humanities Council, Widener University, and also the city of Chester, to create a cultural corridor so that they could tap into the rich resources of art and history and culture within the city to revitalize the city of Chester. It was certainly a big undertaking. But when I met Just Act, again, I'm talking about my perspective, this is who I met. I met an agency that was deeply committed to engaging with community, had that respect for dignity and worth of the person, who believed in building relationships and knew the potential for change, real change, that comes from partnerships with community members. To me, I looked at this and I thought a lot about, okay, I did not realize that. I did not know that, that was an emphasis. And when I started to realize it was very much what I believe in. We were so much alike. We were deeply committed to the same level of understanding of the value of looking for and listening for injustice, but at the same time, looking for ways that we can create new opportunities to construct justice, and that we would be part of the change process. I mentioned Keenan and colleagues here right now because this is a study that was done to really look at, do social workers struggle with, am I a micro practitioner or a macro practitioner? Am I a clinician or am I a social reformer? We're both. Our dual focus is both, and we don't want to lose sight of that. So to follow Lisa Jo's example, I kind of played around and I thought, yes, we are very much alike. We are very similar. Here's where we fit together. So when we joined together for a community project, one of the things I noticed we were both very sensitive to, and Lisa Jo knows this is my mantra in working with community members. Many times we're brought together by an agency or a lead institution who has the money. We're brought together to create change within a local community because somebody has funded that opportunity. And we bring some people together to the table to do that. But do we ever realize that some community members are waiting for an invitation to collaborate? Some community members are waiting to know, are they invited to the table? So today I'm challenging us as social workers to take a step back and think, okay, our practice as community organizers hasn't really changed. We still look at who's the community we're working with, what are the assets we want to tap into. We're still respectful of who's the missing voices that are there and how can we reach them. And we also want to participate in that change process. However, the way to get there may not just be from the evidence-based practice models that have always been part of our practice. Maybe there are different ways that we can get there. And this is what I have discovered in working with an artist, that the cross-sector partnership of art and social work works. What I've discovered that one of the things that it taps into is a part of what is really a key element of our core values, and that's understanding that power of working together. The power of we. So at this point, I want to bring in the magic, if I could, and hand it over to Lisa Jo.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Thank you. Thank you, Mary Beth. So I adore Mary Beth and had no idea when she walked into one of the early events of the Chester Made project that we were destined to travel and evolve our respective practices because of our engagement with each other. I've learned so much from Mary Beth and continue to. And even when there is tension because of Mary Beth's background and my background, not having a history as disciplines that talk to one another, we embrace that tension as an opportunity for creativity and expansion of our respective knowledge and application of that knowledge. I'm not going to read a whole lot about Just Act. I'm actually going to let you do that. We are a theater, we call ourselves a theater-based catalyst for healing, change, and activism. There's a new term for this field that our work is a part of, which is called the social arts. And that's a term that is now used internationally for applied theater and arts practices. Something that Mary Beth said early on when she was just sharing her section was about attuned to listening for levels of injustice and looking for ways to construct justice. I don't know if you can see behind me, there's a poster. Is it backwards or can you see it clearly? It says Just Act, Listen. So Mary Beth made that poster for me when I went to a conference and had a table and was collecting stories, as I always do. The thing that Just Act's work brings to that mantra of Mary Beth's is that the processes that we use are designed for the participants to be the ones to identify how to create justice. That it is not me as an outside artist who's just there to listen, but again, like I said earlier, creating space so that at the individual and collective level, the participants recognize that they can step forward into the spotlight and be okay. Also, so there, one of the Mary Beth slides said something about transactional in one of the continuums, and in many early on arts-based community engagement practices, there was an effort to buck the norm, if you will, of traditional engagement practices that were very transactional, where somebody comes in, gets lots of information from a lower income, primarily BIPOC community, and then takes that information out and makes a fantastic, beautiful final report, and nothing is given back to the community who had opened their arms. And so we like to think about our work as not transactional, but transformational. And in which the empowerment of the participants is central, and that the process of engagement itself is a form of product. And then one more point to piggyback on what Mary Beth said about transformation and change from the inside out. That's really easy to say. And often theoretically that is said, yes, we need to align our insides with our actions on the outsides. But because of systematic supremacy in our country, white supremacy in our country, through an intersectional lens, that practice is really difficult. And so really being our most powerful selves is a lifelong challenge, because we are constantly faced with white cultural expectations that are not about the participants, but about some product that can be held up as a best practice, but not the people. And we actually, Mary Beth and I, experienced the way in which a funder may not continue the practices that she and I embed in our work because it's difficult to continue to honor and value BIPOC community members who have been systematically marginalized, and to find the money for the participants and not for themselves. I think that you can go forward on the slides. These are just pictures of various events that Just Act has done. You can see there's lots of circles. We work on a whole variety of issues of our partners. We only go where we are invited and where we have established relationships. I'm currently working in Eastern North Philly with a CDC with whom we started working back in 2016. Right, and so Just Act, when we create partnerships, we are in for the long game. Mm-hmm. And because at the funding level, this form of deep cultural organizing, at least in Philadelphia, has not yet been celebrated in the philanthropic world. We do the work anyways, because myself as a white woman, mobilizing my privilege and on behalf of my community members, I live in Germantown, and wherever my partners are, is central to the work, so that it's not just critical consciousness, oh, work has to happen, but I know that my liberation, the liberation of the artist facilitators with whom Just Act works, are deeply connected to the liberation and growth of self and collective power of our community partners. So it's not a theoretical concept, it's a lived reality that we embed in everything that we do. And so the power of we is as Mary Beth says, central to our work. And again, the levels of resistance are invisible because of how we have been conditioned. We rarely see the world as it is, but how we are conditioned to see it. And our work redimensionalizes participants. Slide. So what is our timing, Shayna? What do we have left?
You have about 30 minutes left. You go to 11:50.
Excellent. Okay, so this is a picture of John O'Neill. John O'Neill was the founder of the Free Southern Theater, which was the cultural wing of SNCC. And I had the great fortune of living in New Orleans for many years, where John O'Neill resided, and he had his theater company called Junebug Productions. But I was able to work with John O'Neill and learn the process that he and a multiracial coalition of theater organizers back in the mid-60s created, that's called Story Circles. You can go to the next slide. So these are just pictures of story circles of a variety of community-based engagement processes that we have been doing, both in partnership with community development corporations who work in primarily lower income and working class communities, as well as the black and white picture is from something that we call an annual Jam on Justice, where we work with one of our partners, we create some interactive theater called Forum Theater, and audience members are able to interrupt situations of conflict and rehearse new realities. Slide. Great. So could you take the slides out? Yes, thank you. So now we're going to do the interactive part. So that you yourselves get an experience of what we do. This is there, I have to ask everybody who stays to put your cameras on. We're going to be sharing directly with each other. in a particular way that is very helpful to be able to listen both with our ears and our eyes. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Hannah, Valentina, and her cat, Maggie, Karen, and Dr. Donna, when you can join us, that would be wonderful. So I'm going to introduce you to how to do a story circle. And we're gonna actually do one right here. We're gonna just, we were thinking about doing breakout rooms, but I think this is a nice size and we have enough time. So the way that this works is, it's not, so how many of you have ever like shared stories in circles? Right? Like, it seems like a pretty natural thing. We share stories in circles all the time. I know that as a theater artist, we do everything in circles, and Mary Beth has said, oh, circles are a given when it comes to social work as well. So there's another overlap. But John O'Neill created this process so that everyone in the circle who shares a story holds equal power. As I mentioned, that this was a multiracial coalition, and in 1963, things were pretty tense. And so what they created was a structure where a story prompt is shared, and then each person in the circle gets 2 minutes. And at the end of 2 minutes, in the way that I do it, you're going to hear these bells. Can you hear them? Somebody hear them? At the end of 2 minutes, you will hear these bells, and that means that you have 30 seconds to wrap up your story. Now, I know that all of you could probably share a story far beyond 2 minutes. The beauty of timing is that when you hear those 30 seconds, there's an opportunity to like bring it to a moment of pause and then just let it rest. At the end of 2 minutes, we let it rest. There's just like a moment where we're all able to soak that in, and then it passes to the next person in the circle. There isn't crosstalk. There isn't what usually happens here in the United States, where somebody starts to tell a story and they're like, let's say Mary Beth is talking about peanut butter, and I would be like, oh yeah, I too like peanut butter, right? We don't hold space for each other. We interrupt our listening habits because we have been conditioned to say, oh, I know, or I connect, when if you don't connect, that's okay too. And so story circles are an opportunity just to have each other listen with generosity and hold space without needing to comment or make solutions. Just be present with each other. If you don't want to share a story at the time, you may pass. We go around the circle and we invite whoever has passed to, if they would like to share their story, they may pass again. All good. What we have instituted after story circles in our community-based engagement is something called a data jam. I don't even know where that came from, Mary Beth. So one day I just started talking about data jams. And so data jams are we always believed in that Brene Brown quote. What is it? Stories are data of the soul. Stories are data of the soul, and really live that, right? Like, what does that mean in practice? And so for us, we have borrowed from a technique for conversation called the art of hosting. Has anybody done art of hosting work? Look it up, social workers, you'll love it. What we now do before we launch into the story circle is I would like to invite volunteers to listen for particular elements. And that person gets to put up some Post-its on a Jamboard. Shane is going to share the Jamboard so that you can all see it. And then should I put it into the chat again so that everybody has the link?
We can see it.
So the important thing is that you can actually get into it. So I've put it in the chat. And before we do the story circle, Anonymous Grizzly. Let me know with a thumb if you, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so 5 of you have gotten in. Is there someone who would want some? Oh, okay, I think that we're all in. Great. So I am going to invite, and I'll just take you through the slides really quickly here. Somebody, as you're listening to the story, it's sort of like you're the note taker. You're going to capture the wisdom in the different circles and put it under these different categories. One of them is values. One of them is pivotal points. And one of them is moments of magic and synchronicity. So you can take the slide out, Shayna. Thank you. And bring us all back into the room. Thank you. There are other slides as well, but we're just going to stick with those 3 for now, and then we're going to do the others as a collective harvest. So before we begin, I'd like to invite somebody to be our wisdom catcher of the values that you hear inside of a story. The values. And again, it's just like what you have received from somebody's stories and what the values might be. So if you could just like raise your hand to be our wisdom catcher of values. Thanks, Mary Beth. So Mary Beth will be values. Somebody who's listening in the stories for those pivotal points, those moments of collaboration, of transformation, of breakthrough. There's someone who can be our wisdom catcher of the pivotal points. So when you're listening in the story for, right, those moments where something changes. Thank you, Karen, I appreciate it. And then the third one is moments of magic. So they're similar to pivotal points, but they're also these moments of aha, right? They're moments when, great, thank you, John, I appreciate it. Mary Beth, Karen, and John, thank you. And so now what I would like to do is envision that we are a circle in this square. We're in our own sort of like town square here. And the best way to do this would be for me just to give you a number. And if you could put that number in front of your name. And then that way, I can know you can know, and I can know too, who you're sitting next to in the circle. So, Karen, could I have you be 1? Valentina 2. Hannah 3. Maggie 4. Shannon 5. John 6. Dr. Donna, are you there with us? Do we get to hear your voice? Maybe not. Okay, just let us know. Mary Beth, do you want to be 6?
Fine.
And Shayna, how about you be 7? Great. So what's going to happen is I'm going to give you the prompt of the story. And we're going to also write it in the chat. Shayna, do you want to just like pull up the slide that has the prompt so everybody can see the slide, the beautiful slide that Mary Beth has made? You can go to the next one. Share a story about a time when you felt a sense of belonging. Share a story about a time or experience when you felt a sense of belonging. Thank you. You can take the slide out. Great. So I'm going to invite you to share a story about a time or an experience when you felt a sense of belonging. That could have been this morning, or it could have been 5 years ago, whatever comes to mind for you. You have 2 minutes, and I will put my trusty clock on my telephone and time it for 2 minutes. Again, when you hear the bells, wrap up your story. You have 30 seconds to wrap up your story. If you continue, just to let you know, I may jump in and invite you to bring it to a moment of pause. We'll just take a collective breath in acknowledgement of the person's story, and then I will invite the next person to go. And when we're done, we'll do our data jam. For each story, Mary Beth, Karen, and John, you know how to do the Post-it notes on Jamboard. I'm making that assumption because you all are from the academic world, and we've been jamming now for Zoom jamming for over a year, right?
Maybe you should go over it.
I
Okay.
agree.
Okay, great. So I'm going to share my screen, because then I can control it. I think that I can share my screen. So does everybody see Moments of Magic?
Yes.
Just to let you know, I am obsessed with taking pictures of the sky. So that is a real picture that I took. All right, so for the Jamboard, you see this little panel here on the left-hand side. You're gonna go to this one here, click, and then you get a sticky note. And just like regular typing, you type in. If you want to change the color, you go up to the color bar. And then in order to post your sticky note, you write save. And when you're done, you just do cancel. And then you can move it around wherever you would like it. So John, you see the little, it's underneath the big arrow in the circle. Just go, it looks like a little square with writing on it. Have you figured that one out? Is it clear, John? Yes? Oh, your volume's off.
Yes.
Excellent. Karen, you're good? You're good with the sticky notes? Mary Beth?
I think so.
Great. Okay, so Karen, we're gonna start with you. I do want you, since you know the numbers, like just visualize that we're in a circle. Sometimes what I've done with some of the community-based engagement work that I'm currently doing, we actually draw a circle on Jamboard or Google Slides with everybody's name, particularly when we meet on a regular basis, so that we have a visual representation, and then we are able to like see each other and imagine and project ourselves in that circle. So Karen, would you please share a story about a time or experience when you felt a sense of belonging?
Okay, and do you want me to go for 2 minutes, or you want me to reduce the time a little bit? I'll just
Nope,
share, because I want
to.
everybody to have a chance to share, but let me start. Mine's kind of global. And for those who don't know, so about 8-10 years ago, I can't even remember now, I started traveling to South Africa. And initially, as with any new travel, although I do it a lot, and I believe in the power of travel in broadening our perspectives and, fostering that global mindset, it's intimidating, right, to go to a new area, whether it's within our own country or not, because you're not familiar with the language, the culture, just the nuances of how one greets each other. But immediately there was this sense of, I don't know, support. You said belonging. I mean, that's how you feel. You just feel like you are accepted, the embracing you as part of their culture. And that continued beyond, like, right, there is this immediate connection with the individuals, and not just wanting to minimize any fears, anxieties that they may have thought I had, right? Like that wasn't shared, but they immediately put me at ease, made me feel comfortable, introduced me to their community, their friends. They fully, and I became part of their culture, going to their homes.
Karen, could you give us a moment, a story of going into somebody's
Story
home?
yes. And so they brought us into their home, right? And we were having dinner, and it was like, let's, show me what you are preparing for dinner, how you prepare dinner. And just over preparing dinner, right? Cooking, not only did they talk about their spices and the different that they use in the different meals, we got to know each other. And there were times that there were some language barriers, but it was also an opportunity to learn some of their language, right? And then some words weren't easily translated, right? Which happens a lot. But again, it was a way of just sharing. And what does that word mean to you?
What does that word mean to you? Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Karen. Valentina.
Hi, I'm Val, and I guess my story would be kind of a collective of the past year in the pandemic. I work at a hospital, behavioral health in a hospital, so it's been a bit of a crazy year for us. But that being said, I think it was the time that I felt the most sense of belonging because we were all sharing a sense of grief and fear. And also times where we were really working together the most. I think one of the strongest parts that stood out to me was I had a patient come into the emergency department, and she had been a former social worker, and she had been retired, and she was really struggling with how to cope with the pandemic. And this was pretty early on. Everybody had tried walking outside. Everybody had done reading puzzles. And she was like, I don't know any more coping skills. And, I just kind of sat there and I was like, I agree, coping skills are one of those things that are meant to be used short term. And this is not short term. We don't know when this will end. So I didn't really have an answer for her, but I sat there with her and she just kind of cried and I let her cry. So that was kind of my sense of belonging, working in the pandemic with our patients and feeling that global sense of togetherness and getting through this and sharing our fears and anxieties.
Could I sit with you just for 40 more seconds? I'm curious about how did it feel for you to sit with this retired social worker and that acknowledgement of not having an answer and both of you being in that moment?
It's a weird combination because I know that sometimes that saying we don't have the answer is the correct answer, but it really does feel awkward when you're in the moment and doing it. But I don't think she was looking for an answer. I think she was just looking for support and validation that, this is hard. And even though we are social workers and we're trained to handle this, like it doesn't make it any less difficult for us.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
I would like to offer a little bit of something. This was probably the first time I really felt that sort of I had this connection with the whole world. And it was during and after the events of 9/11. I was in New York. I lived there. I was born and raised in Queens. And I had family and friends who lived and worked very close to where the towers went down. And I remember all of the help from all over the world. I remember people who didn't know each other hugging each other. I remember people coming from other states and you know, to help with the recovery or the process of addressing the needs of the people. And I remember feeling like, wow, this is really how it's supposed to be. Not the, you know, maybe not the tragedy and the disgusting thing that happened itself, but the way we treat each other after such a thing happens is the way we should be treating each other all the time.
Dr. Donna, thank you for jumping in. May I sit with you just for, you have 40 more seconds as well, and invite you to share one tiny moment that you yourself experienced some of how we're supposed to treat each other.
I'm really big on self-care, and I do that with my students. I'll sometimes, you know, I'll notice, particularly during like midterms, that the students are really very nervous, very agitated, and they kind of just need a moment. And
So, wait, Dr. Donna.
am I off?
No. I want to invite you to keep with your same 9/11
Oh, okay.
story,
So
since that's where you were. And there was a global sense to what you were sharing. And I want to invite you to be very specific and share a moment when you yourself as an individual, like, felt that when something was happening, where you were embraced.
I don't know that I have.
Mm. Mhm. When you were talking about different people coming into New York, it might have been a sense of like walking down a street, talking with your friends, a sense of connection that you might have felt at that time that clearly still lingers with you.
So during that time I was pregnant. So and I lost my daughter a few months, I had a stillbirth a few months later. So I was kind of, for me, it may very well just be that it was all of the things that were happening at that point. I really didn't feel that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel that for me or with me specifically in that moment. I felt it for the sort of the world around me.
Mm-hmm. Tremendous level of complexity and hardship there. Your partner was with you through that?
He was abusive. Yeah, so I guess the closest thing would be, you know, my mom was, she's been and she has always been and will always be, because she's an amazing human being. Just she was the person who was absolutely supposed to be my mom. And when I was in the hospital and my blood pressure was like way high and I had medication all over the place after losing my daughter, and my mom had 2 children. She got pregnant, just had us both. And then she was like, listen, Rico, we can't feed the ones we have, so we need to stop. And or otherwise they would have had 10 kids. She said to me, I have no idea what you're going through. This is the woman who always had the answers and didn't have any right now. And that was the best thing anybody had said to me. Everyone else was saying like the platitudes, let go and let God. God has a plan. You know, things will be better or whatever. And I was just like, this is not the moment. And she was my rock, and my brother too. My brother is the one who brought me to the hospital. Saved my life.
The power of not knowing. I really appreciate it. I'm grateful for you sharing that, Dr. Donna. Thank you. Hannah, would you like to share a time or experience you'd like to pass? Great, thank you. Number 4, Maggie, a time when you felt a sense of belonging.
First off, I apologize. My whole mouth is blue. I just drank a Gatorade like 20 minutes ago and it hasn't gone away yet. But
Looks good on you.
oh, thank you. I do think blue is my color. But I'm a senior now. When I was a sophomore, I was an orientation leader for the incoming freshmen. And there were 40 of us, and we got to spend about a week and a half all together just training before the new students came onto campus. And there was one day where Dr. Rice was actually one of the facilitators. We did our diversity training. And we did an activity, the iceberg activity or something. It had an iceberg, and it was supposed to show that we don't know what's going on underneath someone's surface. And we all wrote down 3 things about ourselves that no one else would know. We stuck them on the iceberg. And then we went up and pulled 3 off that weren't our own. And we sat in a circle and we got to speak to those people without knowing who they were because it was all anonymous. And there was such a sense of power in that circle and of acceptance and understanding that we were all just sobbing. We were crying over experiences that weren't our own because of the love and the relationship that we built with those people over the course of that time. Even the ones that we hadn't gotten super close with, because there were 40 of us. We weren't going to be best friends with everybody in a week. But I just remember the ones that I read, I remember crying over them. And I remember people comforting me, even though it wasn't my experience. And hearing mine read, and just the kind and supportive words that people said, not knowing that it was me. So having no connection to the person that was saying those words, because they didn't know it was me and that they would say them. Knowing they would say those words to anybody in that situation, and that I would say those words to anybody in that situation, gave me this sense of community and of love that I've never experienced before in a group of people.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you so much. Again, this returning and recurring sense of the power of not knowing and knowing within that space of emergence. Since we have a short amount of time, Shannon and John, is it okay that we pass to the jam board so that we can do the data jam? And I can show you how, as Mary Beth says, we move from feeling into action. So I'll share my screen again. I think that Mary Beth was so present in the circle that you didn't get a chance to put your Post-its up, but maybe we could do that just super collectively since everybody has access to it. What are some of the values that you heard in the stories that were shared? Everybody just take a moment and put up a Post-it. Respect, acceptance, compassion,
Lisa Jo, I was unable to make it work to actually click on the sticky notes. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Human interaction.
Mhm. Can I offer a couple?
Sure.
How about the ability to touch pain, the importance of vulnerability, tenderness. And I'm going to steal a phrase from Daniel Siegel, because when Karen was talking, I thought a lot about, when she was talking about her experience in South Africa, she talked about feeling felt. And if those of you who are fans of Daniel Siegel, he talks about that a lot. Sense of community, certainly Maggie shared.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. Move to pivotal points. Karen, would you share with us just a little snapshot of what you found most compelling in terms of pivotal points? As we all can read them, but what would you want us to walk away with?
Yeah, so for me, what I heard was a lot of that of observations of others' behaviors and reactions. And that was kind of like an aha moment, whether it was respecting another, like I put the preparing of the meal together, but listening and learning from each other. The respect that one gave when hearing your story, even when they didn't know you that well. And then kind of that collective sense of community, that appreciation, kindness that was displayed following 9/11. So for me, what I heard is it was like what we observed and what we saw in others' behaviors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how that observation then impacted our choices.
Yeah.
Right? So that it was like it was a pivotal point. Thank you. John, moments of magic.
I love the power of Gatorade.
Actually, Gatorade is quite a thing. It's the same formula that oral rehydration therapy is.
Mhm.
So in essence, it was a great thing before it was a popular thing.
Mhm.
Most of the people who die in the world today die of diarrhea. And they become dehydrated. And prior to that, you had to put a needle in somebody's arm in order to rehydrate them until somebody decided that putting glycerin and salt and there's one other ingredient that I'm blanking on came together and made oral rehydration therapy, which costs 2 cents a shot.
Mhm.
So John, could bringing that sense of rehydration where poof, instantly you are suddenly hydrated. Can you share something about the moments of magic that you heard in people's stories and that you want to lift up for us?
I think that people coming together in these kinds of situations where we basically come together as people instead of come together as roles are important because, and I've seen that throughout my career as a social worker and as an academic, that we find good reasons to build walls around ourselves. When there's a crisis, that's no longer true. And, we work together as people. We're not always wonderful when there's a crisis, but there's potential. So I heard that in several of these things, that people come together and that's what's important.
Yeah. And coming together without knowing what's in the next frame.
Mhm.
Right.
Beth always says. So I'm going to wind it back to Mary Beth, who always says that this kind of work captures seeing in the next frame. So honoring where we are in the present and allowing it to be our endless Gatorade
That's right.
to co-create
Mhm.
the future.
Sorry, I'm from New Jersey. Sarcasm is my birthright.
Love it. I'm going to remember it. So I'm
Never
gonna
lose that. Mhm.
send it back to Mary Beth to bring us to our final pause.
So it always amazes me that people are willing to share. I absolutely love that about individuals, that they're willing to go there. And I do believe that resilience is contagious. And so once you're able to tap into a little bit of that energy, we can do anything. You can survive anything. So I am grateful for all of you for being open to that, letting yourselves be a little vulnerable. And we respect that you did let us in. I think that's another part. So this had to be captured quickly, in the course of a 60 minutes. I know we're out of time, but I just wanted to mention too, one of the things that Lisa Jo is excellent at is creating a space for silence. As clinicians, we already know the value of that. Watching her do that in communities is absolutely amazing to me, because not everybody's used to sitting like that. So thank you. Thank you, Shana. You're a wonderful zoomologist, as Lisa Jo would say. Dr. Rice, good to see you.
I'm just gonna, like, before everybody flies, it goes boop, boop, boop out of the room, that what we do in our community-based engagement work when we use story circles is that it's usually linked to something.
Mhm.
Right, so that the sharing and all the Post-it notes, this data that surfaces, then serves the community members. So there's this project called the Livability Project, members of part of Eastern North Philadelphia, where there's a lot of violence and drugs and systematic exclusion. And we did a series of story circles with a group of people who were thinking about making change in their neighborhood. And they were going to be given a little tiny bit of money to do a project. And this one particular group was like, oh, we need to pick up the trash and do some greening. After doing the story circles, they realized that beautification for beautification's sake is really not what they wanted. That if they were going to do some sort of greening project, that creating an opportunity for people to come together in relationships, coming together as people, as John said, through the greening project was the most important thing. And so then they were able to contact the Philadelphia Horticultural Society and get a tree or something like that. And then the way in which it came into the neighborhood was not something, it's now a tree, but the neighbors in that part of the section of the city where they live were almost like greening with each other. So that what was growing was their connection, was their understanding of one another's stories. And they basically did story circles inside of the greening. And so and afterwards, it's like you walk down the street and they would say, oh, they would remember who they were with. They would remember who, hauled the dirt or who cleaned up the trash. But it wasn't just the physical act, it was an embodied act, because it was the mind, heart, and spirit and body that were engaging. So the story circles are always a vehicle to reweave the social fabric that has been frayed by systematic oppression and come together with a new sense of power. So thank you. I put my email into the chat if anybody would like to contact me, ask me a question, my shoe size, anything, I welcome it, but thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you to both of you. Conference participants, we are now in a lunch break, and the next sessions will begin at, I want to make sure I get the time right, at 1:10. So you can check your program. Sessions will begin back again at 1:10. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Mary.
Bye.